Serious, what is the most paranormal or unexplainable event you have witnessed? It's M. Welcome back to another video, everyone. I hope you enjoy, and let's just hop right in. Story 1. I'll bring up this story again. It happened to me 7 years ago, and I can't figure it out, but I lost an hour of time in what felt to me like minutes. At the same time, I was working from home after a serious illness diagnosis. I had settled into a routine, up at 7 a.m. and do house stuff, and shower. Then at 8 a.m., start prepping my work and laying out my day. Phone calls and emails from 8 to 9. This is all I remember. It was 7:55, and I brewed a cup of Keurig coffee in my kitchen, located on the main floor of my house. I went upstairs to my office and turned on my computer to settle in, and realized I forgot the coffee in the kitchen. I went back downstairs and got the coffee as soon as I realized I forgot it. Couldn't have been more time than the time it took. Windows to boot up, but I took a sip and the coffee was cold. Not warm, but actually cold. I thought my Keurig was broken, but I looked at the clock and it said 9:14. So whereas I expected it to be 8:05 max, somehow an hour and 10 minutes passed without explanation. It was very bothersome. I have no idea where that hour went. I have never had any blackout before or since, no seizures, and the meds I was on shouldn't have caused a lapse like that. I don't think I fell asleep because I distinctly remember typing my password and saying out loud, "Crap, I forgot the coffee." It kind of left me a bit uneasy. Nothing like that had ever happened to me before or since. And here's a comment with a similar story. My girlfriend and I had a similar experience a year ago. Our phone alarms went off at 6:30 a.m. like usual. We got out of bed and we did our usual morning routine to get ready for work. We showered, got dressed, and I texted a coworker at 7 a.m., saying that I would meet them at 7:45. They replied and said okay at 7:30. Then my girlfriend and I had our morning coffee together, and I went to get my shoes on. Then I looked at the clock and it was 9 a.m. I freaked the hell out because I was late for work. I thought my phone clock was off, but my girlfriend's was the same. We both had missed calls and texts from the span of 7:30 until 9 a.m. We were both weirded out by the situation. 1.5 hours passed while we were in the kitchen for 10 minutes. These stories always make me think that maybe time just passes by when you're having fun, but it is really weird that time just seemed to escape OP without any knowledge on what would have happened. I do know sometimes when we're sleepy, we close our eyes and like 10 minutes can go by. But these people seem to be fully awake, so honestly, I don't know. Story 2. I was in my laundry room and I heard someone come up behind me, and I swear they whispered. I screamed so loud and thought it was my husband playing a prank on me. When I turned around, no one was there, and it was so freaky. Also, when I was a teenager, I was sitting in my room at my computer desk, and a piece of paper and pen went up in the air and slammed back down. I ran downstairs to tell my mom, and I was crying hysterically. My mom thinks I just hallucinated it. And here's a comment with another story. I work in a prison. Before my job in the jail changed, I used to have about 1.5 hours of downtime before it was time to punch out. My sergeant at the time asked if I would cover the 11 p.m. count on one of the blocks. He didn't care what I did before or after, just counted. No prob. I'm sitting in our Times Square area. One hallway leads to 4 blocks, and another hallway leads to the other 4. I'm sitting in front of one of those hallways. I hear someone walking towards me from behind, but I realize I don't hear keys. We all have keys, except inmates. I turn around, no one is there. I think, okay, maybe I just imagined it. Guy sitting in the area with me asked who it was. I guess I didn't imagine it. All right then. 11 p.m. comes, I go to the block. No one is letting me in. WTF. I go back to the Times Square area to call and let the officer know not to panic, I'm coming, I just can't get in. As I'm on the phone, I feel someone behind me, and they lean into my ear and whisper forcefully, "What you doing?" I wave my hand back to signal to them to stop. I hang up and turn to yell at who it was. No one is there. No one is in any hallway. I'm all alone. We have so many stories from this place. But your story reminded me of the second part of mine, so I had to tell it. I've been lucky enough to only hear sounds and never voices. I honestly think if I did hear a voice, I would probably just lose it, especially because I nearly pooped myself, even if I do find out the voice is a real person. Although to some extent, I would prefer for the voice to maybe just be me in my own head, then turn around and see like a full stranger standing behind me. Story 3. I used to live in a town that was pretty strange altogether, but the house was even more so. Most of my elderly family that grew up there have also had weird experiences. I remember one time I got up to use the toilet. The bathroom was next door, which was across the way from my bedroom, And I crap you not, a woman in a full vintage nurse's outfit came running out of the bathroom with a washcloth and into my bedroom. I have no idea if there used to be a poor person accommodating years ago, but the house was very old. That is the good side of it though. There's a lot more. You'd even sit there sometimes and have this awful feeling of a bad presence, as if somebody was staring at you. Eyes burning into your soul kind of feeling, you know? Freaky stuff. Story 4. I was a kid, maybe 10 years old. I came inside in the evening after playing outside in the backyard. I stopped by the exterior door to take my shoes off, and just happened to notice that the basement door across the room was closed and deadbolted. It was an old door that didn't stay totally closed unless deadbolted. I look down, untie one of my shoes, and I hear a loud bang, and look up to see the basement door wide open. I noped the freak out of there with my shoes still on. My parents were in the other room and didn't hear a thing. I went back later and the door and lock were totally undamaged. I have absolutely no idea what caused it and can't really come up with any rational explanation. I was pretty afraid of going into the basement for a while. Yeah, I don't blame OP for being scared of going down there. I'm not a big fan of basements to begin with, even in brand new houses. I think I've just seen too many horror movies of where the people use the basement for torture, or there's ghosts living down there. Anyway, basements for me are just a no-go most of the time. Story 5. After my dad passed away, my stepmom kept asking me if I found the book he was reading in his last months. She didn't know the title. We looked all over the house for it, eventually found it with the stack of magazines. Definitely not where it belonged in the house. My stepmom recognized it immediately when found. The title of the book was Hello from Heaven. I also received a phone call 2 days after he passed away. The phone call was from his phone number. For some reason, I was too scared to answer. I asked the only person who had the phone, stepmom, if she had called from it. She said she left it in the garage where he always worked. This was 14 years ago. I still regret not answering the phone. Story 6. After my mother died, I went to her grave a few times a week. I usually had my kids with me, and this one day as we passed all the older cemeteries, my eldest son, who was 6 at the time, asked, "Mom, what are all those people waiting for? Why are they just standing there?" The cemetery was empty and not a single human was there. When we got to my mom's grave, he held my hand and said, "Don't worry, Grandma's with Mom and they are happy." Mom was my mother's sister, who passed away before my husband and I were even married. My son knew nothing of her, what we called her. He also would tell us when someone had died in a house. Story 7. When I was 13, I woke up in the middle of the night to a strange man's voice. I couldn't understand what he was saying, but he was talking really fast. But at one point, I heard it say my brother's name, and then it started laughing manically. My dad heard it too and came running into my room and turned the lights on. No one was there. Absolutely no explanation. Another time, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I heard what sounded like a cult gathering right outside my window. It was like 3 a.m., and I could just very clearly hear a group of people singing and chanting while a baby wailed. And after about 10 to 20 minutes, it suddenly stopped. The second part of this post might have been something that was worth recording or even calling the cops for. I think I probably would have tried to record the audio, so that way at least people would believe me when I told them the next day, and wouldn't think that I'm losing it or anything. Story 8. I have one. It must have been some kind of hallucination, but it really scared me. I was sitting in my bed watching YouTube for a couple hours. I got up and reached forward to set something on my nightstand or whatever. I had this strange, indescribable feeling that I hadn't actually moved from where I was sitting at all. I quickly turned around and looked at where I was sitting seconds before, and there I was still sitting there. I was out of my body. I could see the shocked, horrified expression come to my face at such a strange sight. I quickly sat back down right in the same spot, and nothing strange happened again. Story 9. About 5 years ago, my husband and I went to visit his grandma. Big, beautiful 2-story house. I was gonna head upstairs to put some pajamas on and saw a woman walk across the top of the stairs. It was only my husband, young daughter, and his grandma in the house. And whoever I saw wasn't Granny. I went into the living room and told them what I saw, and his grandma goes, "Yeah, that's Lori. She visits a lot." Lori was my husband's mom who had died when he was 11. I was so freaking spooked after that I barely slept the rest of the time we were there. I think I would have been pretty spooked too. But it honestly seems like the mom wasn't dangerous or vengeful or anything, so it could be worse. Especially since the grandma seems okay with her being there and doesn't seem too freaked out or anything. Story 10. When I was about 5 to 8, I had a little ghost girl that I played with. We played board games, and she carried around a small stuffed bunny. My parents saw game pieces move around when no one was there, but I saw her. They also saw her on occasion. One night, our house caught on fire. Electric short in the kitchen. Parents called 911, etc. Firemen said the fire melted a pipe under the sink and put itself out. There was soot everywhere. When we came back the next day, written about a little girl level in the soot on the kitchen wall, it said, "I did it. No one had been in since the fire." Story 11. All right. So I had one of those bendy metal lamps on my bedside table. It was facing towards me because I was reading a book in bed, just chillin'. Then the freaking thing suddenly bends right down with the light bulb almost touching the table. I completely froze for a good 5 minutes, trying to rationalize the situation. Then for some reason, I thought the best thing to do was to put the book down, bend the light back to the way it was, turn it off, then just go to sleep. I still don't know why I reacted like that, but I feel like wouldn't do very well in a horror movie. Look, OP really has that horror movie acting down pat, because I would have been out of that room in no time and thrown the whole lamp out. It does seem like nothing happened after that, but still. Maybe go for a walk or something just to get out of the house. Story 12. Mine is not crazy, scary, but it is true. I was in the living room with my grandma. We were the only ones home. She was working on a crossword puzzle, and I was messing around on my iPad. TV was off, windows were closed. All of a sudden, it was clear as day. I heard my name being whispered. But since it was so quiet, it sounded loud. I looked up to my grandma, thinking it was her, asking if she said something. She said, "No, but I heard your name." Story 13. When I was a kid, I took up leather work after we did a bit in Cub Scouts. Every time I was using dyes or finishes in the basement, I thought someone was staring at me. Then one day while dyeing leather, I felt this weird pinch on my shoulder, and I involuntarily turned in my chair. That night, 4 finger-shaped bruises showed up on that shoulder. I don't believe in the paranormal, but kid me was convinced my parents' house was haunted. I never did find a good explanation for the bruises, though. I honestly think one of the scariest things, and the factor that makes me believe in the paranormal the most, is when people end up having bruises or cuts on them that they just can't explain. Like when people wake up with long and bloody scratches, I really do feel inclined to believe them, because it makes no sense how they could get those if they were just sleeping. Story 14. My niece was sitting in the kitchen doing her homework. I was outside playing PVZ on my phone, and my mom was doing laundry or something. I heard an awful crashing noise, and I ran inside to see dishes shattered all over the kitchen and circling my niece. We asked her what happened, and she said the dishes came flying at her. There was no way she could have done it, because like I said, the dishes were circled around her, and she couldn't have sat down that quickly. It was weird. Story 15. I kept hearing scratching noises in my attic for at least a year. One day my buddy was over and we decided to check it out. Went up there and the power went out in the entire house. My buddy and I got kind of scared and we left to go over to his place. Came back the next day with the power on, and I never heard the scratches again. I don't know, this one could just honestly be chalked up to one hell of a coincidence. Maybe there was an animal or something up in the attic and it freaked out and left as soon as it heard people coming up the steps. Or who knows? Maybe this could be like a scene out of the first season of American Horror Story, and there really is a monster living in the attic. Story 16. We had a rental house with a ghost in it. Wasn't a bad ghost. He smelled like marijuana a bit, and he would come sit on the bed. Multiple tenants reported seeing the same thing. Somebody said, "Yeah, dude, if the landlord ever catches you smoking, just tell him it was the weed ghost. He falls for it every time." Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.